Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to RoahmMythril 3, and we interrupt these sippies to bring you the judge commentary from the last couple of stages we just played through. Starting with 111th, Hornet Man got a new stage by 8JKN4. This stage got a 47.6 total, with a 16.2 in design, 10.2 in fun, 4.2 in creativity, 8.8 in aesthetics, and 8.2 in functionality. Mick. It's Hornet Man's stage, but different. At least I think it is. Yeah, not a lot of creativity points to award here. The gimmicks are pretty much the same as regular Hornet Man, and the one difference, the grasshopper, doesn't feel like it changes a whole lot. As for the enemies, the vast majority of Hornet Man's silly and quirky enemies were replaced with bees. Lots and lots of bees. Like, if I didn't know any better, I'd think Dr. Bees made this level. Anyway, it's different from the original stage, sure, but it's considerably less interesting. For some more specific details of concern, Hanabiran isn't the sort of enemy that you want to use 5 times or more in a single level. While it never quite gets to the irritation a lot of people get from the original flower, owed to what seems to be lower HP, it's still excessive, especially when there's 2 of them. More importantly, there's a few glitches on the Honey Woman route, including some missing solids and a suicidal boss? Huh. That's one of those things I don't know if I was just lucky to not experience it, or if that was changed in post or something. Yeah, if anyone knows, fill me in. I'm interested to hear these things. Outside of that, the level's inoffensive, but not great. It has a difficulty curve to it, and it strives to have a decent variety with what it's got, but it's remarkably boring and probably longer than necessary. I'd rather play the original stage. Shinryu. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little intrigued when I first saw the name of this stage. I don't find Hornet Man's original level to be all that exciting, so I was interested to see a different take that would hopefully improve upon the original's shortcomings. Unfortunately, I left this stage feeling more or less the same way I did about the official version. The main issue I have here is that not enough was done with the gimmicks, to the extent that, in some ways, it does even less than Hornet Man's original level. Each one is used in roughly the same way, with incredibly minor variations. It's unfortunate considering how much potential the Bokazuras and rolling platforms have, yet nothing interesting was done with them. The only thing that really sees any notable use here is Hanabiran, and that's mainly due to him showing up way too much throughout the whole stage. Although thankfully they seem to have reduced health. Aside from that, along with the lack of collision on the ceiling tiles in the room after beating Honey Woman, there's not much else to talk about with this one. The actual level design itself is average, and the lack of creativity with the accompanying gimmicks ends up making this stage pretty forgettable in the long run. Patchy. Dollar Store Hornet Man. It's Hornet Man, but with more bees, and that's pretty much it. Can't say I'm particularly too impressed with this one. It's not a bad stage by all means, but it just doesn't do enough to make itself stand out from being just a sloppy rehearsal of Hornet Man's stage. Those grasshoppers from Brightman did add a bit of flavor to the stage, but they weren't prominent enough to change the overall dynamic. The mini-boss spawning prevents screen transitions, and it seems it's not intentional. It's not conveyed to the player enough that they have to defeat the mini-bosses in order to progress. It's especially rough at the ending section, which is a long room. If you choose to ignore the guy at the beginning, you'll then stumble on the hard truth when you reach the boss door and are not able to open it. Oh dear. The boss is just Hornet Man, like Asp. Really no surprise there. There is a secret battle with Honey Woman, who isn't really much of a secret to find, considering I just stumbled on the path to her without even realizing on my first playthrough. Ironically, finding the bee NPC who was hinting at her presence was more hidden than Honey Woman herself. Sadly, kinda true. I think I also just kinda stumbled upon the right path to get to Honey Woman, and the way things were labeled there, I actually thought I failed to find her and was just on normal progression, but no. Flashman 85. Not to be outdone by Cutman and his new warehouse, Hornet Man also went out and got a new stage. I've never been the biggest fan of Hornet Man, the boss or the stage, so I like the idea of a remake. This remake doesn't change my opinion, but it's not a bad effort. Despite sticking too closely to the source material in some regards, gimmick use, mini-boss/boss room architecture, aesthetics, the level has its own identity. There's a cohesive theme, a steady difficulty curve, a focused variety of challenges, though perhaps a bit heavy on Hanabiran, and adequately spaced checkpoints. All the big picture stuff is in good shape. However, the level doesn't hold up as well under closer scrutiny. Players may be in for a deadly surprise if they mistake the first pair of spikes for background decoration. Guilty. or enter certain screens from the wrong angle, or assume that the only bottomless pit is obviously a screen transition. Also guilty! Players may also get confused or stuck if they fail to defeat Hanabiran before reaching the end of a scrolling section. Technically, I think I did do that one too, so also guilty. Several screens have nearly decent challenges that just need some finessing, e.g. the dual Hanabiran mini-boss, anything with the painfully evil hornets, but the Honey Woman path needs an overhaul. The one-way transition checkpoint makes it look like you missed a secret, plus it cuts short the challenge arc with the crickets. Oh, okay, so there was more to them, because yeah, in my playthrough, since I used the Honey Woman path, I think I saw, what, one, maybe two of the grasshoppers? An entire ceiling is missing collision. The difficult and interesting fight with Honey Woman makes Hornet Man feel disappointing and redundant a couple of screens later. The ideas are good, the length and pacing are just right, and for a tile set I'm not wild about, the graphics look pretty nice. More risks with novel combinations, e.g. Hanabiran plus Bokazura, and more attention to detail, perhaps via more extensive, diverse playtesting, would go a long way. And A-Spark. Recreating a Robot Master stage and entering a level creation contest with it is already an uphill battle, and unfortunately this stage does not add enough revisions or novelty to the original. For the most part, Hornet Man did most of the stage first, and actually did it better, especially the Hornet roll platforms. These were wasted in the level. It's one of those things, I know in the engine, assets like that, they just basically get named for which Robot Master had them in their stage. For example, Hornet roll platform, Gut Lift. So, it does make me wonder, is there an official name for those things? Because I'm still confused what they're supposed to be. Having almost every enemy as a bee might have been thematic, but it really cut down on the enemy variety in the stage. As the stage is garden-related, you could have added in some of the other insect-themed enemies, either instead of or on top of your selection. The entire thing became predictable, and the hornets from the WonderSwan game were a particular nuisance here. There are a couple of specific frustrations. One is the first spikes, which are attached to decorations so that they blend totally into the background. Yeah, I legit thought they were just background decoration flowers. And the player can walk into easily. Another is the third grasshopper, which timed very awkwardly with the hornets. You cannot hit them while the grasshopper is on the ground, but when the grasshopper jumps, the hornets dive and hit the player, oftentimes making it very difficult to avoid them. So yeah, I guess I avoided that entirely by finding Honey Woman. I really liked the idea of turning Hanabiran into a normal enemy, although it did still act as a mini-boss and lock screen transitions. Ignoring the flower is basically a death sentence in the last room, as you get yourself stuck. Still, its lowered health does make the fight against two of them alongside the clock arm much less frustrating, but it was still a bit irksome. Using the flower clock does make the Honey Woman fight more interesting. Unfortunately, the stage then ends on a bog-standard Hornet Man fight, which was quite the anticlimax. Fighting Honey Woman skips the final room entirely, so having two paths to the end doesn't help the stage in the slightest really. So, yeah. One thing I do agree with is remaking an existing stage as your entry for a contest like this. It is a gutsy move, and one where you have to be absolutely sure that you're going to knock it out of the park, that you're going to reimagine it in such an amazing way that it still stands out despite being based on an existing stage. Of course, I say this as the person who, yeah, basically one of the few things I'm known for as far as stage design was recreating Jewel Man's stage in Super Mario Bros. X for one of the contest things that Raocow played through. I wasn't part of the contest, I was just asked to do something for the post-game, and that's what I did. And so, I can't really claim it's super original, I just remade an existing stage in SMBX. You definitely did make this stage your own. The layout, the overall map, you definitely did original things. Do I think it's necessarily better than the original Hornet Man? That I'm not sure. The bees are definitely thematic, and I think you used just about every bee that was out there. However, it does take away from some of the variety, like, I do kind of miss the flower presenter enemies. Those made sense to be there since Hornet Man's stage is a garden. So, having, like, the existing enemies there and adding onto it could have worked. Or having more of a balance there, just something like that. All bees all the time, it does start feeling a little bit samey. And yeah, I do kind of wish the path for Honey Woman was... It's a weird balance to strike, of wishing it was telegraphed a bit better, but also hidden better, because it did get confusing that I did find her when I felt like I shouldn't have. Like I said, it's a weird one to really put into words. Like, I think that's why I scienced that pit, was that with it having, like, the top solid platforms within the pit itself, that looked like something to climb back out with, and that knowing there was a hidden boss and likely a hidden token, I figured that was a prime spot to hide her, but it ended up not being so. That being said, I do appreciate the change to the Honey Woman fight of having the clock arm in there. That definitely made it feel rather unique. Which, I do agree that, yeah, just ending with bog standard Hornet Man and nothing to spice up that fight did feel a little anticlimactic after that. I would be interested to see, like, what you could add to Hornet Man's fight to spice it up a bit. Like, how much would changing the room layout do how much would it do for it? Like, can Hornet Man handle that many changes to his layout? That's another thing I'm kind of wondering. Like, if you made it, say, a more concave floor, like, say, what Magma Man has, can Hornet Man handle something like that? Like, I don't know how the bosses in the engine work. That is legitimately something I'm curious about. But overall, still not bad. It's a very functional stage. And hey, again, I'm happy to hear more Hornet Dance. But with that, time for an oh-so-necessary jump cut. Whew. Thank goodness for the jump cut. Even for a turbocharged robot on wheels, you have no idea how long it took me to get over here. Truly an arduous journey. Anyway, 110th place, Shape Woman by Wither of Earth. This stage got a 47.69 total, with a 17 in design, 10.4 in fun, 6 in creativity, 7.2 in aesthetics, and 9.6 in functionality, but with a 5% leak penalty. Mick. Well now, that's an unusual visual design. Loose leaf background and shape block foreground is an effective way to create an identity here, and it does this without sacrificing ease of use. That being said, I was disappointed when it transitioned from loose leaf to JPEG Space Nebula. Keeping that aesthetic consistent would have been a good idea, as it's the most noteworthy good part of the level, especially since the music does the place no favors. Why would that consistency be important? Because while the aesthetic might be unique, the level itself is boring. The majority of Shape Woman is one of two things: long simple rooms with a handful of specifically shaped enemies, whether they be circles or squares, or waiting on tornado batteries for spikes to go away. There's other concepts here, with the sheep block plus cutting wheel room being genuinely interesting, but the majority feels very samey, with the vast majority adding little of interest. Considering the level is over 40 screens long when the average is less than 30, that is a weak point. There's a lot that feels like filler, and it easily could have been cut down. Unfortunately, Shape Woman herself is much the same as her level. Besides her rather baffling design, her boss fight is extremely tedious. Shield bosses are among the hardest to get right, I'll grant, but making a shield that she takes apart piece by tiny piece, and then making it invincible to most of the weapons, including the shield-piercing laser trident, that's one of the worst shields I've seen in a long time, and I encourage players to cheese it. She's a fair fight, ultimately, but she's long and tedious, making a boring conclusion to an already unimpressive level. Overall, not a fan. Ooh, yeah, the shield not being able to be pierced by something that is specifically there to pierce shields. I get wanting to do that to help your Robot Master stand out, and say, yeah, we're not playing totally by the rules here, you're going to see what my Robot Master can do, but when all it is a bit of tedium, yeah. Though I do wonder how you cheese it. Anyway, Shinryu. Honestly, I'm kind of struggling on what to say here. To an extent, there's certain things about this level that are memorable, like the visuals, for instance. They're very odd, to put it mildly, and not exactly in a good way, given the last few screens use highly compressed JPEGs as their backgrounds. As for the level design itself, I honestly found this stage to be rather boring, mostly on account of just how much waiting was involved whenever certain gimmicks showed up. Chief among these are the tornado batteries and Yoku blocks / spikes. They're an interesting combination in theory, but can make for some tedious moments in execution. The enemies only add on to this, as some of them need more shots than usual to take down. All that being said, there was one segment that stood out to me. The part that required you to race a floor of Sheep Man blocks to the end of the room before they all disappeared. That room was genuinely interesting and engaging, and I'm a little disappointed that there weren't more setups like it in order to offset the slower paced sections of the level. As for Shape Woman herself, she unfortunately shares the main issue I had with the level. Her fight ends up being tedious due to her shield having way too much uptime, with not enough interesting attacks in between to justify it. I get the feeling that the idea was to make this something of an endurance fight here, where her shield is slowly chipped away as it goes on. While that would potentially make for a unique boss, there's just not enough variety here to warrant her fight taking so long, to the point where I can't blame anyone who uses magnetic shockwave to speed up the process. Okay, there we go, that's the cheese. Delicious magnetic shockwave cheese. Overall, for as quirky as this stage tries to be, there's sadly just not that much substance to it. Patchy. Ina Pro. Can't say I'm too impressed with this one. It's a very basic stage with not many gimmicks attached to it that would make it stand out. It doesn't help that most of them are default engine gimmicks. If you were to change the aesthetics of this stage, but keep everything all the same, it wouldn't have been much different. The only coherent thing going on that fits the whole shape theme is the various shapes embedded into the tile set, and that's just not enough to resonate with me. The only consistent gimmick of the stage is the timing your jump with the tornado battery through Yoku spikes. Unfortunately, the stage also never expands on it, as it's basically the same deal every time, just with the timing becoming a little more strict with more spikes, or to have a gotcha moment when the player doesn't expect a second set of spikes to appear right when they think it's safe to go through. The rest of the stage is expectedly rather bland, mostly consisting of basic platforming while you shoot down non-threatening enemies and fight some random mini-bosses on occasion. Some of the sections could have probably been trimmed down a bit, while keeping bits like the sections with the Sheepman blocks, so that the stage wouldn't feel boring at times. Music is also a bit on the meh side. The flute instrument gets quite obnoxious after hearing the same short loop repeatedly. Yeah, I'm honestly still not sure if I actually did recognize that song, or if I'm just kind of tricking myself into thinking I did. I still can't put a finger on it. Interesting design for the boss. She's, shapes, and a woman, but certainly doesn't look like a robot master. Also, her circular features jiggle. Real mature there. Gonna be honest, wasn't looking there. Didn't notice. Alright then. But yeah, I do still admittedly kind of like the abstract design she has. It's the same reason I like Virus Man and Rock Force. She's also a shield-based boss, and unfortunately falling big time on the shield boss stereotype. Seriously, that shield lasts for quite some time. Her attacks are also, dare I say, pathetic. She throws pieces of the shield back at you. Watch out, Mega Man! Shapes! At least it means she's leaving openings for you to actually damage her. Flashman 85. Everything was right there to make this level a winner. Just group together enemies and gimmicks with a similar shape, match the foreground graphics and architecture to the shape in question, and maybe adjust the enemy sprites to be color coordinated for good measure. Save mixing and matching shapes for the second half, and don't ruin the elementary school notebook aesthetic by soaking it in water and sending it to outer space. As it stands, the level is a parade of independent enemies whose unifying theme is, we have a shape. Plain mini-bosses and halfway decent gimmick puzzles occasionally break up the monotony of shooting the one thing directly in front of you. I'll give credit for the inspired use of rotating platforms with Yoku spikes, and partial credit for the stretch with cutting wheels. Their invincibility and lethality could be communicated better. They were lethal? Okay. Good on me for just avoiding them. The final stretch is a non sequitur. I mean, there's a film called The Shape of Water. But weaving through spike piles is alright. The boss fight is fair. Larger, more frequent gaps in her shield would make it even better. The level as a whole is visually distinctive, but any given section is a bland open space. So many slopes, so little impact on the challenge, with aesthetics that rarely have anything to do with the gameplay. Moving left through an area with right-facing arrows legitimately annoys me. Shape Woman herself has memorable design, with, an intro jiggle we could have done without. Again, I just didn't notice that. I like the atmosphere created by the music. It fits well. There are other pros, e.g. thoughtfully adjusted enemy health values, and cons, e.g. potentially getting oneself stuck in a ceiling. Wonder where that happened. But the big thing for me is all the missed potential. And A-Spark. Another level where it doesn't do anything particularly egregiously wrong, just a few nuisances here and there. Still, for all its basic nature, it does the job and does have some highlights. First impressions are rather good. This is a weird aesthetic, but I think I'm partial to it, kinda. Kinda overall works, even if it is rather simple. Enemies, even the stock ones, are on theme. Unfortunate that it does all kind of fall apart by the end, though. From the level layouts just getting rid of the interesting block types, to the last few rooms looking rather dreadful and ill-fitting, and even the water segment just kinda works against the storybook feel. Using the stock dev kit Yoku blocks rather than something themed to the stage is also just sheer laziness. Heck, I would have accepted just a recolor. Gray looks too much like the background. Not a fan of the music either. By the end of the stage it really started to grate on the ears and ended up getting itself muted. The stage handles Sheepman blocks well, and when they're combined with a Game Boy Buzzsaw enemy, I'm not too afraid to admit it killed me a few times, but I liked it. It's clever. I'm surprised by the combination of Tornado Man platforms and Yoku spikes. They shouldn't work, at all, but it felt very snappy. For its strengths, I think the final segment has a few too many issues that compound it. It has the worst checkpoint placement in the stage, before a dull yet rather lengthy Sheepman block segment, followed by a high amount of instant death and a token puzzle, which I'd have liked better if failure didn't result in such a tedious trek back. Finally, let's speak of bosses, and I don't think the Mega Man 9 mid-bosses added anything here. No changes, nothing novel. You didn't really need to now, did you? I appreciate being able to just walk past Passworder though, if you don't want/already collected its token. Now, Shape Woman is ultimately a poor send-off. Waiting 5,000 years for the shield to eventually maybe kinda would you please oh pretty please break apart already so I can blast your face with more than the occasional rare lemon. Ahem. It's made all the more tedious because she just doesn't really do anything of note. Very basic, rather unoriginal attacks I've seen as side pieces during better bosses. The sound she makes prior to the charge reminds me of Tim Allen and all the grunting the guy did in that Home Improvement show. Just the type of thing that crosses your mind when there's nothing else to think of. Now I'm gonna have to go back and watch the footage and see what the sound is that they're talking about. Okay, so overall, this is a stage that I think did rely heavily on aesthetics. Overall, I'm not particularly bothered by the ones later on. I did indeed kind of interpret it as the paper got soaked because it was a water segment. In a way that does kind of make sense to me. I do, however, kind of wish the loose leaf background was broken up a bit more, like different segments maybe having different kinds of paper in the background, like construction paper, that gridded graph paper maybe, something like that. The constant loose leaf background, with it being so blindingly white, it does get a little bit hard on the eyes. It is an interesting aesthetic, I just think maybe it could have been worked with a little bit better, but still, it was interesting. And also, I am a fan of Shape Woman's design. I do like designs that are kind of weird and abstract sometimes. It breaks things up a little bit and it can make your Robot Master stand out without being too overly designed. And so, in a way, I can kind of appreciate that. Unnoticed jiggle faces aside, it does make me laugh a little that two people pointed it out and I apparently just flat out did not see it. I will say though that yeah, the fight is a bit tedious. It being a shield that stays up way too long, nothing you do to it can break it down faster. Because like, that's something that works with, for example, Jewel Man's shield. When you're fighting him, is shooting him, that triggers pieces of it to break off and shoot toward you. So you can time it well to where, okay, you shoot one piece, dodge that one, shoot the next one off, and start making more and more of a gap that you can actually hit Jewel Man. Something like that, I think, would have suited this fight well. Because the fact that the shield is made of more pieces than the average shield is, and she's the only one that gets to say when a piece goes away, yeah, the fight kinda drags a bit. Interesting idea, just needed a bit more thought put into it, a bit more playtesting, getting outside audiences and such, which still, again, obviously I post both of these videos at the same time, both the gameplay and the judgment video, so by this point I still wouldn't have gotten an answer on what constitutes a leak penalty compared to can you send it out to friends to have them playtest or what? That's something like I said, I'm pretty sure I got the answer on that before. I think there was another stage we did that had the leak penalty. and I forget what specifically triggers that. Durgan does not have a very long-lasting memory sometimes. Oops. But with that, I think that's where we're going to call this one, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well. Round and round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Sippies!